Hey there. Tonight, we're diving into what happened after the Black Death came to an end. And don't worry, this isn't your standard dry history lesson. We're talking about one of the most dramatic turning points in human history. A time when Europe literally had to rebuild itself from scratch. Oh, and before we get started, if you've been enjoying these kinds of stories, I'd really appreciate a like or a subscribe. Also, I'm super curious to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is right now. It always amazes me how people tune into these videos from all over the world, some even drifting off to sleep while listening. All right, go ahead and get comfortable. Take a deep, slow breath and just let your body relax into whatever you're lying on. Because we're heading back to the year 1453. And trust me, by the time this journey's over, you're going to be very thankful for that modern mattress beneath you. So, congratulations. You've just woken up in England, about 35 years after the Black Death tore through Europe like nothing humanity had ever experienced before. The good news, you survived. The bad news? Well, let's just say, the world you once knew no longer exists. You open your eyes, and the first thing that strikes you isn't what you see, it's what you don't hear. There's no morning chatter in the village square, no laughter of children running through the streets, no steady clang of the blacksmith's hammer, just silence. That heavy, unnatural quiet that lingers in places where too many people used to live. Your muscles ache as you stretch, that deep, bone-tired feeling from working harder than your body can handle. But these days, everyone who's still alive is doing the work of 2, sometimes 3 people. There's really no other option. You roll over, feeling the scratchy straw mattress beneath you. Still, it's an upgrade. At least you have a mattress now. Before the plague, peasants like you slept right on the ground, maybe with a few old rags for warmth. But when half the population dies, well, suddenly, there's a lot more stuff lying around. Strange how that works, isn't it? You sit up slowly, your eyes adjusting to the dim light, filtering through the single narrow window. The house you're in is larger than the one you grew up in. It actually used to belong to the village miller and his family. All 6 of them were gone within a week back in 1348. Their bodies were buried in the churchyard, along with so many others that they had to dig mass graves. These days, you try not to think about that too much. The floorboards creak beneath your feet, real wooden planks, not the hard-packed dirt you were used to. You inherited more than just a roof when the plague finished its grim work. There's a chest in the corner filled with clothes that actually fit, a cooking pot hanging neatly over the fireplace, even a pewter cup, something that once only wealthy merchants could afford. Funny thing about disasters, they have a way of redistributing wealth, just never in a way anyone would choose. You pull on your tunic, wool, not the rough hemp you wore in the old days. It feels warm against your skin, comforting even. Until that little voice in the back of your mind whispers that the person who owned it last probably died choking on their own blood. You shake the thought away, best not to dwell on it. Stepping outside, you exhale, and your breath forms small clouds in the crisp morning air. It's September in England, always chilly this time of year. But somehow, it feels colder now. Maybe it's not the weather. Maybe it's just that there aren't enough people left to warm the world anymore. Or maybe, after you've seen death that close, everywhere you look feels a little colder. The village of Little Wickham lies before you, looking like a mouth with half its teeth knocked out. Empty houses line the path, doors hanging open like broken jaws, gardens wild with weeds, fences sagging where no one's bothered to fix them. Out beyond the village, the fields stretch to the horizon, but instead of glowing gold with grain, they're dull, brown, and lifeless. There's no one left to bring in the harvest. Before the plague, Little Wickham was home to around 200 souls. Now, maybe 60 on a good day. Your stomach growls, sharp, hollow, impatient. Funny thing about surviving the end of the world, you still have to eat. Life keeps moving forward, even when part of you thinks it shouldn't. You make your way toward the village square, passing the old well, where people used to laugh, share gossip, and trade news. The bucket still hangs there, its rope frayed, and the water level low. Maintenance. That's the word that defines everything now. Every roof, every road, every tool, all slowly falling apart because there simply aren't enough hands to keep it all together. The bakery's still boarded up, has been for 3 years. Thomas the baker died with his wife and 2 sons. His young apprentice tried to keep the ovens going for a while, but bread making isn't something you learn overnight. The few loaves he managed to produce could have doubled as bricks. These days, people bake their own bread, or try to. Turns out a lot of knowledge vanished with the plague. All those little family tricks and skills passed down through generations, gone in a matter of months. A faint trail of wood smoke curls into the air from the direction of the manor house, Lord Edmund's estate. He survived, barely. Lost his wife, his 3 children, nearly his entire household staff. Now, it's just him, a weary steward, and maybe a dozen servants left to run what once took 50. Poor man. Imagine a noble forced to handle his own chores. Times really have changed, and that's where things get interesting. Because here's something that would have been unthinkable before the plague. You're not going to bow when you see him. You're not going to drop your eyes or mutter, "Yes, my lord," or "No, my lord," like your father used to. Because now, Lord Edmund needs you more than you need him. When half the population disappears, the few who remain suddenly become priceless. Basic supply and demand. Medieval edition. Your boots crunch softly on the frost-covered grass as you walk toward the manor. Today's the day. You're going to ask for higher wages. 3 months ago, that thought alone could have earned you a whipping. But 3 months ago, Lord Edmund had choices. Plenty of peasants lining up to work his land. Not anymore. The manor looms ahead, stone walls rising gray and cold against the pale morning sky. Once, it seemed grand, intimidating even. Now, it just feels hollow. Expensive walls surrounding an empty heart. Most of the windows are shuttered. No sense in heating rooms no one uses. You lift your hand and knock. 3 solid raps that echo through to the quiet air. Footsteps approach from the other side, slow and heavy. The door creaks open, revealing Richard, the steward. A man who used to have 3 assistants. Now he does everything himself. "Morning, Thomas," he says, voice tired in that way everyone's voice sounds these days, worn down by too much work and too little rest. "Morning, Richard," you reply. "I need a word with his lordship." Richard raises an eyebrow. Before the plague, a peasant asking to speak with a lord would have been unthinkable. But this isn't before the plague. He nods toward the stairs. He's in the solar. "I'll let him know you're here," Richard says. You wait in the great hall. And even here, you can see how much the world has changed. The old tapestries hang limp and dusty, their colors faded from neglect. No one's left to care for them. The long wooden tables, once crowded with servants and guests during great feasts, now stand pushed against the walls, draped in sheets to keep off the dust. At the top of the staircase, Lord Edmund appears. He's smaller than you remember, thinner, frailer. The plague didn't kill him, but it might as well have stolen 20 years from his life in just 5. His clothes are still fine, made of rich fabric, but they hang loose on his frame. Even the wealthy don't eat as well as they once did. "Thomas," he says, descending the stairs with slow, deliberate steps. "Richard tells me you wanted to speak with me." "Yes, my lord," you reply, voice steady. "It's about my wages." The words linger in the air between you. A year ago, even 6 months ago, just saying them out loud might have earned you a beating or a few days in the stocks. But Lord Edmund doesn't shout. He just sighs, the weary kind of sigh, from a man who's had this same conversation too many times already. "What are you making now?" he asks. 2 shillings a week, you answer. But John over in Great Wickham, he's getting 3 shillings for the same work. And they give him an extra measure of grain. Lord Edmund's jaw tightens. John's always been... He pauses, catches himself, then exhales. "What exactly are you asking for?" 3 shillings, you say, and Sundays off, properly off. Not just morning service, then straight back to the fields. The old Lord Edmund, the man he used to be, would have exploded at such boldness. He'd have called the guards and made an example of you. But that Lord Edmund is gone. The one standing before you now has only a handful of workers left, maybe 5 if that. He turns toward the window, looking out at his fields. Fields that should be shining gold, but are now nothing more than brown stubble. Work that must be done, and not nearly enough people to do it. After a long silence, he says quietly, 2 shillings and 6 pence, and you can have Sunday afternoons off. You act like you're thinking it over, though honestly, it's better than you dared hope for. But you've learned something over these hard years. When someone needs you more than you need them, you hold the power. "Done," you say, extending your hand. He hesitates, then takes it. A lord shaking hands with a peasant. Your grandfather would have fainted at the sight. As you leave the manor and walk back through the village, you pass by the churchyard. The old cemetery filled up long ago, back when the plague was at its worst. They had to carve out new sections of land, but those filled up too. Now, graves are scattered everywhere around the church like fallen leaves, silent reminders of how much the world has lost. Still, somehow, life keeps moving. You spot Margaret, hanging laundry behind her cottage. The dress she's wearing is far too fine for a widow, but her husband had been the wealthiest merchant in the village before the sickness took him. Now, she owns his trade, runs it herself. Women taking over property and businesses, something that would have been unthinkable before. Funny, isn't it? How catastrophe can also create opportunity. She waves and you wave back. Maybe later, after the day's work is done, you'll stop by, share a meal, talk about how things used to be, and if the mood's right, maybe even about what could be, because that's the thing no one tells you about surviving a disaster. Eventually, you stop just remembering the past and start imagining the future again. Your stomach growls once more, a familiar reminder that survival still means work, food, and shelter. But as you turn toward your own fields, land you now rent, land you finally own a part of, your thoughts are no longer just about getting by. They're about what comes next. You're not just thinking about surviving anymore. You're thinking about getting ahead. The path to your fields takes you past the old grain mill. Its wheel still turns, slowly creaking with age. But there isn't enough grain to keep it busy for long. Before the plague, it spun from dawn to dusk through harvest season. Now, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day, if that. But even that's starting to change, slowly, almost imperceptibly. The people who remain are eating better, working fewer hours, and asking for more. And when folks have a bit of extra coin in their pockets, they spend it on bread, on meat, on all the little things that make life worth living. It's like watching a broken machine sputter back to life. Not the same as before, but in some ways, maybe even better. Your fields stretch out ahead, not vast, but yours. Well, rented. Still, under terms your father would have never dreamed of. Lord Edmund was so desperate to have someone till this land that he agreed to let you keep 60% of whatever you grow. Before the plague, a peasant would have been lucky to keep 20. You crouch down and run your hand through the soil. Dark, rich, full of promise. The earth feels alive again. This patch of land could feed a family, with enough left to sell at the market. Maybe, if all goes well, even enough to buy that empty property down by the river, the one that sat untouched since the Hartwell family perished. Because here's what no one saw coming. When the plague finished its grim work, it left behind a strange new world, one overflowing with land, but short on people. And for the first time in centuries, that meant ordinary folk finally had choices. You spend the morning breaking ground for winter wheat. The wooden plow bites into the soil, cutting smooth furrows under your hands. It's hard and honest labor, but it's labor you chose. You're not here because a lord demanded it. You're here because you decided to be, and that changes everything. Around midday, you stop to rest. A simple meal of bread and ale. The bread's your own, baked from your own grain. It's heavy, a little burned on one side, but it tastes better than anything a baker ever sold. Because it's yours. As you eat, you look toward the village. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, fewer than before, but the ones still burning seem brighter somehow. People heat their homes better now. They eat fuller meals. They wear warmer clothes. The plague took almost everything, but in its terrible way, it also left everything behind for those who survived. You finish your meal and return to your work. The afternoon sun warms your back as you guide the plow through the fields. In the distance, you hear laughter, children's laughter. It's Margaret's kids playing near her cottage. There aren't many children left, and their voices carry far. In the quiet air, it's a lonely sound, but not a sad one. Because those children are growing up in a world where a peasant can bargain with a lord, where a widow can run her own business, where someone born in a one-room hut can work land that's finally their own. That has to mean something. As the sun dips low on the horizon, you clean your tools and head home. Home to a house larger than the one you grew up in. Home to a meal that would have seemed a feast to your parents. Home to a life that, though born from tragedy, is undeniably better than what came before. Tomorrow, you'll plant more wheat. Next week, maybe another talk with Lord Edmund about wages or working conditions. And next month, who knows, maybe you'll make an offer on that property by the river, because the world ended once, and then it began again. Different, smaller in some ways, but somehow so much larger in others. That night, as you settle into bed and pull the warm wool blanket up to your chin, your thoughts drift toward the future, toward the children you might have one day. They'll grow up in a world where people like you, people who work the land, sweat for their bread, and earn every bite, finally have a voice in how things are done. And that's not a small thing. That's everything. Your eyes grow heavy as the village quiets for the night. There are fewer voices now, fewer fires burning, but somehow the ones that remain seem stronger. The laughter feels more meaningful, the silence more peaceful. The Black Death took nearly everything, yet what it left behind, that strange emptiness, became space for something new, for possibility, and word travels fast in small places, especially when it's bad news for the powerful. By autumn, 3 other peasants in Little Wickham have followed your lead, asked for higher wages, and actually gotten them. Margaret's even hired 2 of her neighbors to help with her late husband's merchant business, paying wages that would have sounded like madness just a few years ago. But success has a way of drawing attention. Far away, in London, whispers start to reach King Edward's court. Whispers about peasants getting bold, about lords paying outrageous sums, about the natural order of society turning upside down, and the king, he's not pleased. You first hear about it in late October from a traveling tinker who rolls into the village with his cart full of pots, pans, and most importantly, gossip from the outside world. As you pick up a copper pot, he leans in and says, "Parliament's passed a new law. They're calling it the Statute of Laborers. Says no worker can demand more than they were paid back in 1346, before all the dying began." You set the pot down, slowly, a cold weight settling in your stomach. "What does that mean, exactly?" you ask. The tinker glances around, lowering his voice. "Means if they catch you asking for higher wages, they can put you in the stocks, brand your face. Some places, they're hanging folks." The copper pot suddenly feels heavier in your hands, as though it's absorbed the weight of his words. "Of course," the tinker adds with a half smile. "A law is one thing, enforcing it's another. Hard to punish a man when you still need him to plow your fields." That night, you lie awake, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. The house that once felt like shelter now feels fragile, like a target waiting to be struck. Because that's the truth about progress. It always makes someone angry. Morning brings frost and trouble. Before the sun even rises, there's a knock at your door. Lord Edmund's steward stands there, his face pale and stiff. "His lordship wants to see you," he says quietly. The walk to the manor feels different this time. Longer, colder, heavier. The stones beneath your boots seem to whisper warnings, and your breath fogs in the icy air, vanishing as quickly as it forms. Lord Edmund waits for you in the great hall, but he isn't alone. 2 men stand beside him, draped in the king's colors, royal commissioners, swords hanging at their sides. The air feels colder inside than it does out. "Thomas," Lord Edmund says carefully, his voice measured, unreadable, "I'm afraid we need to renegotiate our arrangement." One of the commissioners steps forward. He's young, maybe 25, with soft hands that have never known soil or sweat. "By order of King Edward," he declares, "all wages are to return to their former levels, those of 1346, 2 shillings per week, no more." Your heart hammers in your chest, but your voice stays calm. "And if I refuse?" The young man's expression hardens as his hand drifts toward the hilt of his sword. "Then," he says coldly, "you'll have the pleasure of explaining your refusal to the king's justice." The stocks are already standing in the village square, and you can see brands heating in the forge. You turn to Lord Edmund, searching his face for some trace of sympathy. a flicker of the man who once bargained with you as an equal, but he won't meet your eyes, whatever power you thought you'd earned. It's gone, just like that. I understand, you say quietly, because what else can you say? But as you make your way back through the village, something catches your attention. A small crowd has gathered near the well, voices low, tense, urgent. Margaret's there too, along with several farmers from the neighboring villages. You stop and listen. They can't just take it back, someone mutters. We're the ones doing the work, another replies. We're the ones they need. A third voice cuts in, sharper, bolder. King or no king, dead men can't plant grain. You step closer, feeling the air between them charged, like the moment before a summer storm. These are people who've tasted freedom, and they're not about to give it up. What are you thinking? You ask. Margaret looks up. There's steel in her eyes now. We're thinking, she says. Maybe it's time the king learned who really keeps this country running. That afternoon, as you work your fields, you see smoke rising in the distance. 3 columns at first, from the direction of Great Wickham, then more. Little Thornton, Wickfield. By evening, the horizon glows orange against the darkening sky. Granaries, tax records, manor outbuildings. Nothing meant to kill, but everything meant to send a message. The revolution has begun. It starts small, as revolutions always do. A tax collector here, a royal commissioner there, suddenly finding themselves unwelcome in villages where they once commanded obedience. Sometimes it's cold shoulders and closed doors. Sometimes it's stones thrown from behind hedges. By winter, it's spreading. You hear the stories from traveling merchants, the few still brave enough to wander the roads, peasants in Kent marching on royal castles, workers in Essex refusing to harvest for lords who won't pay fair wages, whole villages in Yorkshire vanishing overnight, people packing up everything they own and moving somewhere better. And the incredible thing, the lords can't stop them. Punishing a few rebels is one thing. Punishing half your remaining workforce is suicide. Lord Edmund tries threats first, then bargaining, and finally, something unthinkable, begging. Look, he says during yet another awkward meeting in the great hall. I know what the commissioner said, 2 shillings. But what if we called it 2 shillings plus expenses, food allowances, extra grain, ale? You fold your arms, pretending to think, though truthfully, you're enjoying the sight of a lord squirm. What kind of allowances, you ask? Well, he hesitates. Meat twice a week, good bread, ale with dinner, and you can keep your house, no rent. It's not everything you had before, but it's something, and more importantly, it proves a truth the nobles can't escape. Laws are just words on parchment when reality refuses to obey. You shake his hand again. This time, his grip feels desperate. Winter descends over the village like a heavy blanket, but the quiet it brings is restless. Letters begin arriving at the manor more frequently, carried by nervous messengers who never stay long. Each one brings more bad news for those who still cling to crowns and titles, because when you kill half the population, you don't just lose workers, you lose the web that held everything together. The unquestioned obedience, the old assumptions about who matters and who doesn't. And once people start questioning those things, it's almost impossible to make them stop. Spring arrives with whispers of something bigger, not just scattered protests over pay or food, but full-scale uprisings, organized, focused, led by people who've decided they're done being peasants. The name on everyone's lips is Wat Tyler, a man from Kent who, apparently, has told the king's commissioners to go straight to hell. And the king can follow if he likes. They say he's got 10,000 men, Margaret tells you one morning as you help her repair her roof, all of them armed, all of them furious. You drive another nail into the thatch, the rhythmic thud of the hammer steadying your thoughts. 10,000 peasants, angry, united, organized. Before the plague, that would have been unthinkable. There wasn't enough hunger, enough courage, enough hope. But after the plague, you've already seen the impossible happen, again and again. What's he fighting for, you ask. Margaret wipes her hands on her apron. An end to serfdom, fair wages, justice for corrupt officials. She pauses, her voice softer now. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? You nod. It does. By early summer, the rebellion isn't just a rumor passed along by travelers. It's visible in the sky. Black pillars of smoke rise from the direction of nearby towns. Tax offices burned, refugees stumbling down the roads, their carts piled high with whatever they could carry. And then, one June morning, you step outside and see them. Armed men camped right in your village square. They're not royal soldiers, not quite local peasants either. Something in between, weathered faces, calloused hands, but they're carrying real weapons now. Swords, spears, bits of armor clearly taken from other battles. Their leader surprises everyone. A woman. She stands tall, sun glinting off the edge of a borrowed breastplate, speaking with a calm authority that quiets the crowd. We're marching to London, she announces, voice clear and steady, to lay our demands before the king himself. Anyone who wants to join, you're welcome. Someone from the back shouts, "What demands?" She unrolls a piece of parchment, though it's obvious she doesn't need to read it. An end to serfdom and bondage, fair wages for every worker, no more poll taxes, and punishment for the officials who've grown fat while honest people starve. The crowd murmurs, uneasy. Everyone knows what rebellion means. People get hanged for less, but then again, people have already been hanged for asking for fair pay. What makes you think the king will listen? The voice cuts through the noise. Lord Edmund, flanked by his few remaining guards. He still wears fine clothes, but the authority is gone from his tone. He sounds more tired than commanding. The woman meets his gaze. There's almost pity in her eyes. "With respect, my lord," she says. "The king doesn't have much of a choice. Half his tax collectors are dead or hiding. His armies are scattered, fighting uprisings from here to Scotland. And winter's coming. If he wants the fields plowed, the bread baked, the roads repaired, he needs us more than we need him." She's right, and everyone there knows it. That night, as the rebels make camp on the common pasture, you sit on a low wall watching their fires flicker against the dark. You think about what's coming, about the life you've built since the plague, about how fragile it all still is. Margaret's already made up her mind. She's sold her shop to a cousin, packed her few belongings into a wagon, and volunteered to manage supplies for the march south. "You coming?" she asks as you help tie down a bundle. You look around at the fields you've tended, the house you've rebuilt, the small but solid life you've carved out from the wreckage of the old world. It's a good life, better than your parents ever had, but it's a life that exists only at the mercy of people who take it back the moment they could. You take a breath. "Yeah," you say finally, "I'm coming." Because in the years since the plague, you've learned something important. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about building something worth living for. The next morning, you lock your door. You leave a note for Lord Edmund, short and to the point. Gone to discuss working conditions with the king. Then you shoulder your pack and join the long line of villagers heading south, following the road toward London, toward uncertainty, and maybe, just maybe, toward something better. And so, the road to London begins. Not just for Thomas, or Margaret, or the thousands marching beside them, but for everyone who's ever dared to believe that change is possible. The world ended once, but from its ashes, something new began to grow. Because sometimes it takes losing everything to finally understand what freedom really means. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more tales from history's turning points are on the way.